Good evening. Welcome to another edition of the Tom Murphy Show. Tonight we're going to have a special guest on. In the last few months, the Village of Mamaroneck was fortunate enough to hire a new village manager. The process that we went through was very thorough and very arduous. The village hired an outside firm, a headhunter firm that specialized in government placement. We appointed a citizens committee to vet the resumes and to interview the candidates. The Board of Trustees obviously interviewed all the candidates many times. And through the process, at the end, both the Citizens Committee and the Board of Trustees unanimously agreed on one candidate, a man who had a lot of experience in government, but a man who also has the ability to lead people and to take complex issues and boil them down into bite-sized chunks that the board can digest and work with and that the community can understand. And I'm pleased and proud tonight to introduce our new village manager who's been on the job a couple of months, Mr. Jerry Barbario.
Thank you, Mayor.
Jerry, thank you. And it's a pleasure to have you here tonight. Your first time at LMC TV.
Yes.
You are now the director of LMC TV,
right.
So you're a master of all you survey here.
Right.
So
I don't know how to do anything right now.
but,
right.
Yeah. Jerry, tell us a little bit about your prior experience in government.
So I grew up on Long Island. I grew up in the village of Lynbrook. Mm-hmm. Early on in my early 20s, I got involved in local politics, helping with campaigns and canvassing. And I knew there was something there that related to politics, related to public service. I went to college, got out of college, had a small landscaping company, and then had an opportunity to join the County of Nassau. And I worked at the County of Nassau for several years. Half of my time I worked on the golf courses, the Red Course at Eisenhower Park, and then I was moved into the county executive's office. I was the county executive's personal assistant. I would be with him all day long as he went through the county and attended functions and meetings. I would be there with him to manage his affairs while we were out of the office.
So that's a great experience for a young man to be kind of trailing a chief executive of a large county like Nassau that has over 1 million people. And the government in Nassau has a lot of functions that other counties don't have. They're very involved in the local government, and there's a lot of parks in Nassau that are administered by the county.
Correct. There's a lot. They have their own police force
right.
With different precincts throughout the county. It was a master's degree in county government for sure during that period of time. And so slowly I was moved into several offices. I was the liaison for the county for the Office of Disabilities and the Office of Aged and a couple of other departments, Board of Elections. And so that experience continued my attraction to government. During that period of time, the county executive wasn't going to run for re-election, and my wife and I, who had just had a brand new baby boy, were looking to do something different. And so at that time, we decided to take a job in southern New Jersey to operate a tree and shrub nursery. And I did that for about 8 years. We had 300 employees. We were operating in 2 states. We had about 2,500 acres of land. And so it was a tremendous operation. And that's really where I was able to hone my management skills. I used my degree in horticulture and my management skills there as I was developing them to really build that business. Right around year number 7 or 8, the County of Atlantic in southern New Jersey sent me an email, called me up, and they wanted me to run their parks department. They knew that I had been involved in county government as a volunteer for a little while. And so I was able to secure a position as the Director of Parks in the County of Atlantic in New Jersey, and also the Assistant Director of Public Works.
Oh, wow.
And that really expanded my knowledge base. It really allowed me to work on projects and different things that I had no exposure to. So all of this stuff continued to build up and build up. During that period of time that I worked at the county, I was also an elected official. I had put my name on the ballot, and I had run for office, and I was able to secure a position on town council in the town of Hamilton, where I was living. I did that for 4 years while I worked at the county. And they had a couple of retirements at the town of Hamilton. They had their business administrator and their public works manager retire at the same time. So they created this combined position, and they asked me to apply for it. I had 14 applicants, 8 people were interviewed, and I was able to secure that job. So I went from an elected official to an appointed official, and I was there for 7 years before I came to the Village of Mamaroneck.
Yeah, that's one of the things that stood out to me when we were looking at your resume and interviewing you, is that you also know the kind of the responsibilities and the pressures of being an elected official.
Yeah.
So that it makes it easier for you, I think, to work in tandem with elected officials, because you know kind of what the pushes and pulls they have to go through on a day-to-day basis. Dealing with constituents and trying to balance the needs of constituents against what is practical.
Mm-hmm. And so that was where I was able to learn the difference between who sets policy and who makes policy compared to who actually has to function and operate the government. And so I think that I've done really well in learning to do different sides, and that's exactly right.
In my assessment, you've been here a few months now, you seem to be acclimating yourself very well into the Village of Mamaroneck. Mm-hmm. What are your impressions of the community? Because it would be, it's like a fresh set of eyes we have here. The community in general, what are your impressions? Other
than the harbor, I feel like it's the same village where I grew up. It's the same people. They're friendly people. Many different areas where people can enjoy themselves. There's a great Mamaroneck Avenue. There's a great downtown environment. And of course, all the different residential communities that we have here. It reminds me of home. It reminds me of where I grew up. And so right then and there, I feel comfortable in that environment. But what I see is that this community is really dedicated to making diversity a priority. Yes. Really welcoming all types of people. I said to you, I think it was last night, my parents came here in 1966 and became citizens within 5 years right away.
So you're first generation.
I'm first generation.
Italian American.
And I know, because I'm the oldest in my family, I have 2 brothers and a sister. I know what kind of struggles my parents went through, and I know how tough it was, the language barrier and just acclimating in a different environment. And so I have a soft spot in my heart for people who are really trying to become part of the fabric of the community.
And last night last night was June 10th at our Board of Trustees meeting. We welcomed 8 brand new citizens to the United States, people who had immigrated here over the years and who worked hard, passed the test, and did all the requirements of new citizens. And it was a very touching moment. You could see it in their eyes how much this meant to them.
Oh yeah.
And a couple of people had their children there dressed up in dresses, and it was a momentous occasion. And it felt good to know that we're a community that welcomes diversity, that welcomes the new immigrant. Because as you know from your own experience, that new blood coming into the country is what keeps us vigorous.
Yep.
It keeps us from atrophying. New ideas, new faces, and it makes us the great country that we are.
Mm-hmm. Immigrants like my parents and the immigrants that are coming to this community and coming to the United States are some of the hardest working people.
Exactly.
And so that builds up, that continues to build up all of the great things that we have, and the foundation, it just keeps improving the foundations that others before them have built. And you could see last night the emotions that were building up inside each one of them. It was really very touching.
Beautiful. It really was.
Yep.
God bless them. Now, let me just ask you another question. What have you found dealing with your new job that is the most challenging part?
We have a lot of committees, and so I need to make sure that I understand what the committees' roles are. I need to understand how the committees can help with, in an advisory capacity with the, with the Board of Trustees. It's been a little bit of a challenge to understand exactly how I can help these committees and how these committees can help the Board of Trustees. And so I'm still focusing on that, and that's really the biggest challenge. The easiest thing has been working with the employees that we have. I mean, we have great people working in the Village of Mamaroneck, and they've all been fantastic. I understand that I'm the village manager, and there's probably a little bit of concern about making sure that I'm happy in everything that we're doing, but they really do have a good heart. They're really grounded in this community, and they care. And what I've always said is, you can't teach someone to care. You can teach a lot of people to do a lot of things, but you can never teach someone to care.
Yeah, I think, I think what they needed and what they have now is an effective leader.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
And I believe me, I wouldn't say it if I didn't believe it. And I think you're right. They come to work and they want to do a good job.
Yep.
They come to work, they love this village,
Yep.
and they want to make it a better place.
Yep.
And they've been very successful about that over the years. And we have a lot of people who work for this community who are multi-generational, folks who, parents, grandparents, sometimes great-grandparents, came to Mamaroneck years ago, and they made this their home. And we're now working to try and change some of our laws, especially our zoning laws, so that hopefully people who are generations in, who aren't particularly wealthy, their children can stay here. Yep. And continue that heritage, because it's nice to have fresh blood coming in from the city and from the immigrant community, but it's also nice to have a core of people who generationally know this as home. And they populate our fire department. As you know, we have an all-volunteer fire department, which is a rarity, especially in a community like this. And that's kind of the fruit that we've been picking off the tree is our local generational people who have populated that fire department. What do you think are the biggest challenges for the village government ahead?
So it seems like we talk about it for a little while and then we forget about it, and we talk about it and forget about it. But the flooding and handling the flooding issue and working with the Army Corps of Engineers to try to get these projects moving, that is a big deal. That's something that we have to stay focused on. Even though it's not present and it's not something we're thinking about today, we have to make sure that there's progress every week, every month, that we have progress.
Because it's going to happen again.
It's going to happen again, and that's when then it's going to be too late. And so we need to keep focused on that. That's the biggest challenge.
I agree with you 100%. I was a trustee in April 15th, 2007, which is a date that means a lot to a lot of people in this community, because that's when we had an awful flood that inundated the majority of Washingtonville and a lot of parts of Harbor Heights. Even though it's named Harbor Heights, there was a lot of flooding in the Heights. There was a lot of flooding all over the community, and a lot of people lost a lot. And unfortunately, what happens in these situations too is that the people who have less resiliency, who have less resources, are sometimes the people who lose everything. And I'll tell you, that was a heartbreaking experience, because as an elected official, you're doing everything you can to help, but there's just so much that needed to be done. Right. And it was just, people, a lot of people in this community who suffered through that flood and other floods are now traumatized. And every time it rains, or heavy rain, they get really nervous. They get and they have reason to be, right? Yep. But it's something that we deal with. It's kind of in the community psyche now.
So we touched on a little bit last night at the Board of Trustees meeting about a readiness and preparedness. And I think that might be something that I want to work with the police chief on, to make sure that we really have some kind of a connection with the residents of the community, to try to prepare them in the event that a hurricane, a flood, something along those lines occurs. We have to be ready. We can be ready as a village. We can be ready as a public works department or as a police department. We can prepare, but we want to make sure that the residents are preparing as well. And so there may be a couple of things that I might be asking the Board of Trustees to roll out, potentially ready-go bags and those kinds of things. That there's always grant money available for that kind of stuff. And so I think we can do stuff like that.
I can't speak for the whole Board of Trustees, but my gut tells me that they will be ready to support that. I remember in '07, driving around with then Chief Leahy was Sergeant Leahy at the time, and we were driving into Flagler Drive and trying to convince people that they had to evacuate. So you know, there's a lot of people with a lot of experience in this community that have gone through this that would be, you know, more than eager to make it better for everybody.
Yeah.
Where do you see us going forward in 5 years? You know, what improvements would you like to see?
So, I've always been somewhat of an operations guy. I present myself as an operations guy, making sure that we're doing the best we can with what we have every single day. But there are improvements throughout the village. One of my first items that I did in the first week or two that I was here is I went to every park and looked at and made this extensive list with the General Foreman of Parks, Barry Castarella, and our Recreation Supervisor, Jason Pinto, and I went around and I made sure that we had this long, comprehensive list of all the improvements that we need to make at the parks, because we have assets here that need to be, we have 14 parks, and we have assets that need to be improved so that the residents can have more enjoyment. We were at the grand reopening of the Spray Park last Saturday, and one of the park commissioners came up to me, and she said, you know, this village has the best facilities. My son never wants to go anywhere. He just wants to stay in the village. On Saturday and Sunday, he wants to go to the park, or he wants to go to the Spray Park or to the beach, and we just stay in the village all the time. And that was fantastic to hear.
That is so nice to hear.
Yeah, that was fantastic.
As an administrator and as an elected official, that's what you want in your community.
That's exactly right.
I know that there'll be a big improvement coming up in Florence Park. Florence Park, the pathway, the circular pathway, that's, I think it's a third of a mile, has been, you know, it needs to be replaced, long story short. And it's going to be replaced and widened. Yep.
We're out there with the contractor today, actually, taking a look at making sure that we finalize everything.
Excellent, excellent, because that is, not only do people run and walk around it for exercise, but a lot of children pass through there on their way to school in the morning, and you know, the more attractive we can make it and the safer we can make it, the better we'll be.
So it's a 14-acre park in the middle of a neighborhood, a walkable neighborhood where everyone around there can utilize it, and it's just a fantastic, it's a gem. It's a gem. Really, and we have these pocket gems all over the village.
And just for people who don't know, Florence Park is on Florence Avenue, and it has tennis courts. Yep. It has basketball courts. It has a great playground, you know, basically for kids under 10. That's a really great playground. They're talking, the folks in that neighborhood are talking about fundraising for a playground for older kids. It has a third of a mile track. It has a very bucolic setting that you could sit on a bench and sit under a tree and look at nature all day. Whatever tickles your fancy, you could do there.
Some of the improvements we want to make, specifically at that park, is we want to bring back the bocce ball court, and we want to bring back shuffleboard courts. And they're already there. The bones are there. We just have to make sure that they're renovated in such a way where everyone can enjoy them.
Did you ever play bocce?
Yeah, I did, yeah.
You did?
Yeah. My father's a champion out on Long Island.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he's a champion.
So you got the spin down?
Yeah, he does. He does the spin and the attitude, that's what he has.
Well, you're closer now to your family and to...
Yeah.
That's nice.
Yep. It's easier to visit my family on Long Island. It's easier to visit my brother-in-law on Long Island. So that's a big deal. Obviously, moving is always a little bit of a challenge.
Yeah,
but
it's stressful.
That'll take time. That'll take time, and that'll go well.
Yeah, it will go well. And you seem to be a person who's going to fit right in here.
Thank you.
Yeah, and you know, and like you said, we have I want to touch on our other staff. We have Mr. Fusco, clerk treasurer, who's really been with us. Augie must have been with us 17, 18 years now, and he is a mainstay. You know, and you know, he was very good when we were in that kind of limbo after the other village manager left. He helped keep the ship afloat, and Dan Sonoff, who you know, is your able assistant now.
Yes.
And you know, and Tony Accavelli, the head of DPW. So there's a really good team.
There is a great team. The village engineer, very active.
Yeah, Hernani's a very good engineer.
Yep. So we have a great team. And I just got to keep them busy. That's my job.
From what I understand, you've been successful at keeping them all busy, which is good.
Yep.
Idle hands at a devil's workshop, right?
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
Well, Jerry, this has been a pleasure, and I really appreciate you taking the time to come down here and have this conversation. I wanted to introduce you to the residents of the Village of Mamaroneck. You're at Village Hall. They could contact you.
Yep.
777-7703.
Yep.
And your staff will forward any message. And I know you've been very good about dealing with citizen concerns.
Yep, and I speak Spanish, so they can call me, and I can talk to them on the phone.
I want to tell the audience. I was at an event with Jerry at the Community Resource Center, and there was a group of moms, and a lot of them, Spanish was their main language, and they were asking a question in Spanish, and there was a translator, and I'm waiting for the translation, and Jerry starts answering the question. And I had no idea he spoke Spanish. It wasn't on his resume. It was a pleasant surprise. It really was.
Yeah.
But Jerry, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor.
Looking forward to working with you.
Very much. This was great. Thanks.
Thanks.